Welcome to Dare, the show for startup leaders, innovators, and entrepreneurs who dare to shape the future. Dare is brought to you by the Oregon Entrepreneurs Network, OEN, and Darwaft, the superpower tech team that can make your vision a reality. The Dare Show is excited to welcome Justin Gravett and David Ashton, co-founders of Canopii, which can be found at canopii.us. And it's a fantastic new company that is focused on supplying fresh produce with autonomous greenhouses. So they create fully automated technology that can make a greenhouse go through the roof. So we're going to learn more about that. We're going to learn more about their startup journey here in Portland. Welcome to the show, Justin and David.
Great. Thank you. We're excited to be here.
No, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Well, it's exciting to see what you're doing because there are so many people who are interested in optimizing agriculture. So is that where you guys fit, or do you guys think of it as a different type of market segment?
No, I would say 100% our focus is on optimizing agriculture, primarily just the supply chain in general and the labor needs that are required for, traditional agriculture. So our farms are able to be placed closer to the consumer and have significant reductions in labor needs. And therefore, we're reducing transportation miles, significantly more sustainable, a whole lot of other factors I could get into. But yeah,
Got it. Well, let's back up a second. Just talk about what's the state of affairs today, like without Canopy. What does it look like? How many people? What's the kind of chain of data or of actual produce from the farm to the table? What does that look like? And then what does your revised or better chain look like?
Yeah, I can take this one. So most of our produce, we focus on leafy greens and herbs. Most of it comes from Salinas. And as the year progresses, it moves south. And so it ends in Mexico and then during the winter and then moves back up to Salinas when the season comes around. So pretty much all of our leafy greens and herbs are coming from those regions and is distributed through the country. And it goes through a cold supply chain, which has been optimized for efficiency. And a lot of food has been optimized to fit within that supply chain, but it's also wasteful and it fluctuates. And we can have seen through the pandemic that it's pretty fragile as well. And so what we're doing is we're building farms that are modular and smaller scale, but we leverage robotics for labor automation to bring produce to non-arable and arable regions. So we can grow produce locally without relying on supply chains.
Got it. So if I wanted to grow tomatoes in the middle of winter, ideally, I could do it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so greenhouses are nothing new. We build
Yeah.
grow vegetables and greenhouses forever. We specifically focus on leafy greens and herbs. We can grow tomatoes and vibrant produce in the future, but right now our labor automation is focused on doing leafy greens and herbs due to its relative simplicity in harvesting the whole plant opposed to picking with automation. So yeah.
Yeah, got it. Got it. So do you have a prototype today that you've built?
we do. Yeah, we have a full scale prototype located in Hubbard, right next to our office, actually on the property of our manufacturing partner, GK Machine, which is a great relationship that we've established. And yeah, so right now we're growing basil primarily. We've grown a variety of other leafy greens and herbs in the farm, but we're focusing right now on basil and working towards organic certification.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
I take a step back. We're focusing on leafy greens and herbs because they're highly perishable. A lot of different vegetables, like root vegetables, carrots, like the average like apple is a year old by the time you eat it, by the time it's harvested. And so we're focusing on crops that don't fit within the supply chain super well, or are highly perishable, like herbs or lettuce.
Got it. Wow. You said something really interesting there. So an apple could be a year old by the time I eat it?
Yeah, yeah.
I had no idea. That's really fascinating. So you guys seem to know a lot about agriculture, a lot about automation. What led you to this? What in your work or educational background brought you here?
Yeah, we're actually both from California. We both went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, which is ag focused school. Justin was actually an aerospace engineer. I'll let him jump into that more, but I was within BRAE, which is a bioresource and ag engineering program. And
Uh-huh.
just being in the Central Valley, you get a grasp on how much lettuce is just grown there. It's all centralized. And leaving California, it's like, oh, there's not a lot of lettuce grown anywhere else. You don't see in the fields and understand the centralization of that product. It's pretty breathtaking, I guess, or it's pretty remarkable. And so I think there's been a trend in consolidation within farming, and that trend has been consistent because of the lack of efficiency in small and mid-sized farms, particularly with labor automation or with labor and technology. And so we focused on creating something that can be leveraged by small and mid-sized farms, that they can leverage automation and industrial technologies like other larger corporations are able to benefit from.
Wow, yeah, I know a little bit about the Central Valley in California, and a huge amount of agriculture happens there. A huge amount of stuff is grown that we eat all over the US and potentially all over the world, right?
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so
And
tell me
okay.
more, Justin, about your background in aerospace, was it?
Yeah, so went to school for aerospace engineering, worked in that field for about 6 years, still in San Luis Obispo after college. David and I met in the dorms actually, and then the year after that, our sophomore year, shared a room together in a house. So yeah, it's kind of funny. Figured I could at least work with him on a business level if I could share a room with him for a full year. So it's been great. But we kind of went our separate ways after college, and then he reached out to me with this business plan for a fully automated greenhouse farm, and I thought it was pretty remarkable and really detailed. And he put a lot of thought and research into it. So we ended up applying to a phase one NSF SBAR grant, and were awarded that. And so we were able to start the company and build a small subscale prototype in St. John's. And yeah, just continued from there, raising some local capital from Oregon-based investors and received additional grant funding from that. But the grant funding was definitely foundational in us being able to start this hardware-based company.
Fantastic. Yeah. So I think, of course, of the classic sci-fi movies that have agriculture in space. Like I think Silent Running is a classic from way back in the day that had all of these pods with things that could grow out there in space. So people are eating in a healthy way. You aren't taking yours to space yet, but when you said aerospace and agriculture, I immediately thought of these scenarios. So I'll just ask, I mean, do you see this type of technology as going elsewhere someday?
I mean, I hope so. Probably not the exact design that we have, but there is a lot of work being done in the aerospace field for, understanding how to grow food for humanity in space. But that's
Right.
not, I guess, our primary focus at the moment.
Right,
But it
right.
is
It's not your
something that,
focus right
yeah,
now. Maybe,
yeah,
maybe in
it is
20
something.
years.
Yeah, it is definitely a very cool thing to think about.
Yeah. So right now you have this prototype right next to your office. You're hoping to expand out further. What does your team look like? What's your growth trajectory been like?
I was just gonna say, yeah. So it was first just David and I for about the first year of the company. Then we hired a full-time senior mechanical engineer, and as of more recently, we've grown the team to six over most of those over the last additions over the last 6 months. So we have a plant scientist, we have a electromechanical engineer, and we have a senior software engineer. That's the current core team right now. Definitely technical focused, but we're bringing on a full-time business development manager in the next month as well. So we're going to be at 7 full-time employees pretty shortly.
Oh, fantastic. Great. So what's your funding situation been like? Have you come out of grant funding or VC funding, or where's your money coming from right now?
Yeah, we've done both. So as Justin mentioned, we got a National Science Foundation phase one, and we've also received Business Oregon support, and we've also received the phase two and a bunch of other follow-on investments from the National Science Foundation. We've also received investments from Virtue Labs, Elevate's Gap Fund, Ideaship, Willamette Valley Capital, and Onami. And each one of so we raised the vast majority, if not all, pretty much all of our money within Oregon by the federal government, and I think we're close to about 3 million at this point. And all of our supporters within Oregon have been extremely helpful beyond the investment dollars, and every one of them has made additional more than one investment in us over time.
Yeah. Got it. Well, congratulations on all the funding in the state of Oregon. So, one question that I have that's super important is how do you differentiate yourself? You work in a space called controlled environment agriculture, right? Or CEA. So it's
Mhm.
technology-based approach to farming. So, how do you guys stand out in that world?
Yeah, so we sat back and kind of watched for a long time. So a lot of money is poured into this industry, billions
Mhm.
and billions of dollars, and there hasn't been a clear success in our
Right.
opinion. And so we've kind of sat back and learned from the winnings and the failures and different kind of approaches the industry has taken. We kind of break it up into greenhouses, vertical indoor farms, and then container farms. And so each one of those has their advantages. I think vertical farms have the advantage of the automation, the technology, but they use way too much energy. Whereas greenhouses have been proven as a way to grow produce that's affordable, but the scale required to do that is pretty massive. And then they also, with the scale of it, applying automation, you also require distribution. And lastly, like container farms are small farms that can be placed pretty much anywhere, and they have the ability to bypass supply chains. And so what our farm has done is we've taken a little bit of all those things We have an automated greenhouse. We design everything from scratch, so it's cost effective. We didn't apply technology where it's not necessary. So we pretty much just added technology just to reduce labor. Well, we had to reduce labor significantly where people don't have to go within the greenhouse, but once every 2 weeks. And we've also did it in a footprint of about a basketball field. And so a basketball field space for our greenhouse produces about 2 to 3 acres equivalent and about 300 heads of lettuce per day. And
Hmm.
so what we found with our sets us apart is that because of the hands-off nature of our farm, we can address markets that aren't typically just agriculture markets. So restaurants or supermarkets can vertically integrate their leafy green and herb production. So instead of renting lettuce every single year to buy X amount, they can essentially buy the lettuce in the forms of a farm. And then once they pay the farm off, they're just making revenue. And so we've been talking to restaurant groups, supermarkets, universities. There's a pretty broad range of markets we can go into with our technology. People aren't traditionally farmers.
Got it. And so I'll come back to that question of there's been a lot of money invested in the space. There's not been a clear market leader. Why is that? Are there people entering the space who don't understand the market, or are there people who have thrown good money after bad into ideas that don't really pan out? Or why hasn't the space ended up with a clear market leader? And how are
Y-
you going to be that?
Yeah, there's a lot of, I guess, there's so many, there's a lot of answers to that question. And just, I think from the capital standpoint of building these farms, it's very capital intensive. And I'm not sure it's always the best fit for venture capital. It's hard to pay off $200 million facilities, and it's hard to bring back a 10x return selling lettuce. And so that's why I think a lot of these companies just failed is that they keep throwing technology at the problem and making the facilities more expensive, which makes the return on investment more and more difficult. So the speed to deliver the returns required of venture capital and maybe not always a great fit for vertical farms or controlled environmental facilities. So we've been fortunate enough to raise most of our money through grants, which are patient. We can prove out the technology, prove out the correct data on the operations, and make sure that it actually pencils out financially before scaling it and selling the farms as tools and not being in the business of selling lettuce. Additionally, I think a lot of people did too much in the industry. I think a lot of these farms are designing their facilities, they're growing the produce, they're distributing the produce, they're marketing the produce. Those are all individual companies by themselves. And I think that's far too complicated for any company to really do themselves, starting from zero to that amount of scale. So there's a lot of mistakes made. Whereas we're really focused on just building the farms as tools. We don't want to be in the game of marketing lettuce. We don't want to be in the distribution of lettuce. And in the long term, we don't really want to be in the business of growing lettuce either. We want to be building the tools for farmers or other small businesses.
Yeah, and one thing to piggyback off what David said as well is that it seemed like there wasn't enough of a focus initially on the unit economics involved. And so the consumers, it didn't seem like most consumers wanted to pay $4 or $5 for a head of lettuce when they could get one that looks the same for about $1.50. So it was, and that's what they were kind of needing to be able to recoup the cost of the production.
Yeah. And in terms of also supply chain, so the last thing to add on this is I think the cold supply chain is expensive. It was created due to the centralization of food production. And so what a lot of these companies I think did was they create these massive facilities where they're making an insane amount of produce centralized. And so they still require the supply chains. And so I think the supply chain adds this pretty significant amount of money at the end consumer, which makes the product $4 to $5 for a head of lettuce. So we found it necessary to bypass that supply chain to make the cost of the consumer more affordable. Because at the end of the day, it's just a head of lettuce. We're not making wafers or anything. And so we have to understand like the price is extremely important, like Justin was saying, at the consumer.
Right. I mean, the ultimate goal of companies in the CEA space is to make produce that's great for human beings and that is less expensive and requires less capital investment, right? I mean, those are the ultimate goals, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely been our focus, more so than claiming it's the most nutritious head of lettuce you're ever going to get or claiming it's the
Yeah.
most perfect lettuce you're ever going to get. No, it's an affordable, good lettuce. We're not making any claims that it's better than, anyone else's lettuce.
You aren't injecting your lettuce with, I don't know,
Yeah.
adamantium or something.
Mhm.
Got it. Okay, good. So you're on this path and you have a pilot customer that you're going to market with?
Yeah. So we're currently at the stage of collecting data for the pilot customer. Uh,
Mhm.
they sell a very high value crop, which is basil. And we discovered pretty quickly that selling produce is very relationship driven. And
Yeah.
so I think a lot of these companies were going in and competing with the relationships that have been have been nourished for generations. And so our pilot customer is something that we like falls in line with what we've been saying with our narratives that we want to enhance an existing farmer and just increase their capacity. And so right now we're going through collecting proof of concept data for that customer to make that initial sale. So we're just growing and selling our produce to that customer over the next year. And
Right, right. I noticed that this is a customer to be named later. So you aren't releasing the name publicly, but at some point in time, when you have that customer ready to go public, we'd love to know about it. I know I'd love to go down there and buy produce I know came out of one of your greenhouses. That would be fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah, we'd
yeah,
love to have you down and visit too.
Yeah. Great. So after basil and after these initial herbs, what other opportunities exist for this type of technology?
Yeah, so we're actually going to be working over the summer on another grant to develop harvesting automation for living herbs.
Mhm.
So, like when you go to the grocery store and you see a living head of basil or a living, I don't know, living mint, things like that. So, our harvesting robotics are going to need to be adjusted to support that. But we received a USDA grant to be able to develop that. So, that's kind of one new market that we would be potentially going after. It applies to plant starts as well and potentially like nursery and forestry type crops. Long term, we mentioned tomatoes and berries, things like that. There's the potential to develop automation to support picking of those types of crops as well.
yeah,
Peppers, things like that. And with the scale of the greenhouse, what's so great about it is that we can grow things that might not make as much sense on a large scale, but do make a lot of sense on a small scale. So more like specialty crops that may be more specific for a region where this farm is located.
Got it.
yeah. And to piggyback off of that, a lot of the industry is really focused on berries right now, but we decided to go to the living varieties because the living varieties are really ideal for local farmers because the packing efficiency with a living like basil, for example, is so bad. The packing efficiency, it's all air volume because you're
Mhm.
packing a living plant. And so it's really a great crop for local farmers and local markets.
Right. So one thing that I totally skipped over is you guys are building an automated warehouse with robots. I mean, I'm putting robots in quotes for those people who are just listening to audio. And, when we think of robots, we think of something like C3PO, something moving around with human arms and human legs and maybe a human face. But those aren't the types of robots that you guys are building, right? I mean, what do your robots look like and what do they do?
It's more like a plant factory.
Okay.
Yeah, so navigation systems are very difficult to design and implement, especially in greenhouses where the environment is always changing. And so we've
Yeah.
actually designed our farm to go vertical, not to save space. I think it's an added bonus, but we fundamentally believe that like land is not an issue in the United States, but labor is an issue. So our farm is actually vertical in nature to simplify our robotics. So we have three simple gantry robots that do all of our gantry robot is essentially a robot that's on a linear axis and it just goes back and forth and it's very simple and robust. And the vertical nature of our farm allows us to bring plants to these robots. And so our
Mhm.
robots are nothing complex and they're a very cost effective way to automate the harvesting because, as I mentioned, at the end of the day, we're dealing on millimeters and not microns. So our accuracies aren't super important.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
you
don't
aren't
have
doing
any.
like surgery on a human body. You're just chopping some basil off, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
moving it around and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and
So for
the robotics move slowly because plants grow slowly. So they don't have to be super high speed or anything like that. Yeah, we can seed in the middle of the night if needed. We can harvest in the middle of the night. Yeah, a lot of factors like that.
got it. Great. Well, so we've talked a little bit about your technology, about your funding, about your team, how you're growing as a company and what you're growing, and then where you're going next, right? So, eventually, my dream is for you guys to go to space. I don't think that's your dream per se, but your dream
It's
is,
mine for sure.
yeah. So being able to provide healthy, good produce at a cost-effective price within this kind of CEA automated environment sounds like a really great startup. And so, of course, I'm going to get to our last question, which is, what do you dare to dream? That's the big question.
I would
Go.
say for us, yeah, the dream is to just build a more resilient and sustainable fresh produce system, something that's not less reliant on imports and distribution, energy, and labor as well. So we can help just bring access to fresh produce and tasty produce available to more people.
Yeah, I think the vision to piggyback off that is kind of combining the cottage industry with the industrial industry, where you could deploy automation, industrial automation into communities, but those communities produce just what they need within that community, and the local economies are be able to benefit from automation and not just centralized production. So that's the ultimate dream, is to essentially democratize industrial automation through farming.
Fantastic. Well, I wish you all the best with those big dreams. And congratulations on your company's success so far. And I hope the Canopy has a long way to grow.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thanks to our guests today for their insights into the entrepreneurial ecosystem. We wish you all the best in your startup journey. The Dare Show is brought to you by the Oregon Entrepreneurs Network and by Darwaf, the superpower tech team that can make your vision a reality. Visit us at oen.org or at darwaf.io. Thanks again for listening. Till next time.